Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. We are still continuing with our home edition, and I have two fantastic guests with me. A little bit of background about who they are. We have met Sukhi before, and he's quite well known around the circuit in terms of, I guess, well, you described yourself as a Sikh celebrity businessman. That was an interesting one. I've not seen that before, but that's okay. Yeah. In the circuit, well, in the circuit of people who are able to help people, coach them. They are a person who's got a lot of experience, so they're counting on real value in terms of the people that they work with. And he has an enormous following right now. And Gary Setterfield, who's a lovely person who works with him. We were talking about the roles. Both of you are strategists. Let me tell you a quick background about Sukhi to start off with. He's one of the youngest millionaires. I think by the time he was about 27 with his family business. He has been a Forbes judge and continues to do that. If you know about business, Forbes is a very highly renowned organization as well as publication, and they are advisors. He's a TEDx speaker. He has also developed a whole load of methodologies as well, and continues to grow from strength to strength. I think one of your businesses within your group of companies, the Sukhi, I think you call it the Wahiwala group, you have also the business boardroom, which is a very successful way of bringing people together. Now, Gary Selworth, lovely to see you, Gary. In ages since we last met. Thank you for taking time out, both of you, to come on the show. A little bit of background about Gary. Over 26 years of banking experience, over 20 years, you're younger than that, you're very young actually, years of actually being in the coaching, always compliment your guests, you know, in the coaching field, in the field of development, personal development as well. I won't steal your thunder, I'll get you to talk more about the kind of things that you do. But I think, again, the combination of having actual real experience and also having the qualifications to back it up, and also providing those skills to individuals who will be looking for that support, right? As not only in terms of their current career, if they're starting out as, you know, graduates or whatever, but those who are in career and are looking for their next progression and how they can actually do that. And both of you share the common approach of developing methodologies that really work. And we were having a chat earlier on during the day today, that it is about experience, but more than experience, it's also about providing techniques that they can use immediately in the field. Now, the three things that we wanted to talk about today was I wanted to talk about optimism. I want to talk about also the lockdown. How has it really impacted people in terms of, has it given, in your views, because you're in this industry of personal development as well as coaching, as well as advising people to become better business people, has it given them a chance to be kind of looked at a retrospective? Have they said, actually, do you know what? Now that I do this in my business, I could do this, although I can't actually see customers. And the final piece of the puzzle really is around the area of, you know, being optimistic, but in the confidence context. You know, as businesses start to unlock in terms of their own business's potential, they need to build confidence not only in themselves, but also in the fact that customers will come back and they themselves will have to invest in their businesses to be able to make it safer for people to come back. So that's a really interesting area I thought we'd develop with you this week for the next 20 minutes or so. So thank you, Sukhi. So let's start off with Sukhi first. Sukhi, tell us, you know, what's your view? Do you think that, you know, it's hard at this time? I know you've been having a lot of outreach programs to people that have been effectively stressed by the lockdown situation, whether it be work or whether it be personal life. Do you think it's now a chance to be optimistic?
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Just if I may start off with my humble honour. I'm very, very glad that you brought me on today, and really humbled, to be honest. So with reference to one of the questions that you just asked there, whether it's a time to be optimistic again, that, if I can start that in a second, what I've found is we've taken action, and we'll talk about it a bit later. I'll let Gary talk about the social side of things, what we've been trying to achieve to create that Samaritans type environment, but for a younger generation connected with an audience is called the Feel Good Friday social movement. But if I may, I'll ask Gary to talk a little bit about that. But going directly to your point in question was how and do we have enough evidence to become optimistic again? Well, I think as it comes to the economy, we should always be optimistic within ourselves, because mankind, humanity as a whole, has always faced adversity and then thrived thereafter. We're ingrained by that. We have Guruji within ourselves. We have God within ourselves. We have the ability. So where there is that understanding of God or universe within ourselves, how can there ever be anything else but optimism and gratitude for being alive? But if I go into more technicality, if I can, the understanding of our current situations, we've seen it very clearly. And if I may talk a little bit about the energetic flows or the wave of what we classify as lockdown, as you specified lockdown, there is a real science to all the lockdowns, which actually resembles and reflects within war, within governmental turns and phases within the countries. So the principle actually is something that I talk about quite a lot about, is actually very, very true. And if you're aware of a slight psychology structure, which is called the disc philosophy, this is when it's a psychometric understanding. It's like a scientific assessment of one's understanding of the world or of themselves. So it's like having like a bird on your shoulder, always watching you with a camera, in essence, and reciting it back to yourself with a simple report. But from the understanding of the disc psychometric understanding and the philosophy, there's a deeper understanding, which I've written with Maharaj's Kirpa, may I share. I use the word I, but I must reframe it honestly. It's Mera mujh mein kich nahi, jo kich hai so tera. Whatever I have within me is not mine. I'm just talking about what Maharaj has given and gifted to the freeware of this world. So in context of I'm just going to share that when I wrote the Synagogus method, it's specifically about making complexity really simple to understand with actionable steps within our 3 commandments of understanding as well. So in essence, there is an energetic flow of every single change in the planet. So there are the dominant areas, the influencer areas, the D, the I, the influential times, the compliant, the stability times, and the compliant times. That's DISC. So DISC comes across, and I want to be very quick with this because I know there's a short, bite-sized conversation around this, if I may. Basically, if I give the unlocked code for reference of the flow of the energy of a lockdown, of war, of governmental political agenda and change, world global structure, it always goes in the same 4 cycles and then recites, restarts again, cyclical. So the first energy that is shown is dominancy. The dominance energy is about end result, fight, flight, getting really powerfully controlled and my way or the highway. And I think of just me. Does that make sense? Myself, ego, understanding. So in principle of aligning it to, let's say, the UK in specific, and it's the same across the globe, by the way, when we first started getting told around the second week of March that there's going to be this pandemic issue, and 23rd, 26th of March was when it locked down. What happened is they went into a fight and flight situation. They all went off and started, there was a joke around, and I don't mean this in a very loose way, because I have had people within my family and extended family lose their lives to COVID-19. So I know this is on 100.
Know about people that have that. Absolutely, yes.
Right, 11 people, to be honest. It's a very, very large interest and a very big thing that's happened to the world, Sadh Sangaji. So the principle of this is I'm just going to give my version of it to try and help people understand if I can. So what you've got is a dominancy energy. This is when we fight, flight, we go straight into the mode of pulling, taking, absorbing, gluttony, greed, all those elements kick in first. Bunch jaw kick off, and we start to think of myself first. So the energy is about going to fill our house up with 10 pints of milk when I'm only using 1 pint a week, and it's going to go off, over purchasing, over exaggerating. So that's the first energy that happens, and you can liken it to all of that's what happened in the UK, and it happened across the globe as well. The second energy that shifts, panic, yes, panic, fight, flight. Me, myself, my survival, don't care about anybody else. Stock up my garage, stock up my house. As long as I'm okay, as long as my family's okay, I'm good. Then we have an energy where it shifts into the compliant energy. Compliancy is when we talk very, very specifically about the structure, the strategy, the planning, the order, the organization of things. And this is what we moved into the next stage. Well, hang on, it wasn't a very good move having 10 bottles of milk and taking away, the shelves are empty, the person who needed it, they had nothing there, they didn't have any food. And so the hamdardi comes back in, the love comes from inside. You often start to think about how you can strategize this properly and put an order in place. So that's the next phase that comes in. The third phase, I'm rushing this a little bit just because I want to be aware of our time. The third phase comes into the influencer phase. And the influencer is the I energy, where we start to think about freedoms, frivolousness, and I want my rights back. I want my understanding back. This is the distracted stage from the core understanding of what's on. We'll go out and risk being in the open without lockdown, without SDP, without social distancing protocol. We'll try to do whatever we can against the will of the nation. And this is where the I have my own rights and freedoms comes involved. And that's basically the third phase. We're currently in that phase where we make these frivolous energetic choices, but the final phase will become stability, where we come back into rest, safety, security, and life becomes a new norm somewhere along the line. But that phase, in order for that phase to happen in our current COVID crisis, is for us to have either an inhibitor or a vaccine of some kind. That's the only time that stability can come in. We might be rotating between these as fight, flight. If there's another wave 2, we go fight, flight again, go straight into compliancy, we start to order conscientiousness, and then we go back into retaliation, rejection again, and then we'll come back to safety at that end point. Hope this has helped a little bit, but just before I finish, the key here is wherever you are, it's correct just to be aware of it. There's no right and wrong. Everyone's got their own version of the world, and as long as we can bring our core understanding, which is our natural understanding of ourselves, because all of us have a humanity. We are the same philosophy within us, especially with our Guru Nanak Dev Ji, our founder, sharing that we are in a state of love, which is what we need to do. And Guru Gobind Singh's philosophy of Sach Keho, Sun Leho e Sab Hai, Jin Prem Kiyo Tin Hi Prabh Payo, which is in Tav Prasad Savaya, and specifically allows us to understand that unless we speak the truth, and let me tell you the truth, and listen to the truth, and become the truth and become love, we can't connect to God anyway. So in that humble understanding, the shifts between these phases is always ignited by that self-love again. So you go from the dominating fight, flight, as you said, the selfness of it, to shift from there to the compliance energy. We have to have that ignition of love once again. So we start to think about what effect it's having on other people. I've hoarded it all. Did I really need all that? And we start giving back to food banks, and the Sikh Sangat across the globe has given so much back in Seva. So we have that energy of energy shifts to the C, and from C again to shift it into the I energy after the state of love. Do you know what? I really love my mum, my dad, who's stuck across the other side of the city, or I've got to go there. I'm going to try it. I'm going to give it a go. So that love again energizes you that way. And once the same again, when you get the final stage of shift from influencing energy towards stability energy, again, love will be the case of I feel safe again. It's okay. My self-gratitude there, and you move to that. So, Waheguruji, if I helped a little bit, I hope that helps a little bit.
I think what's interesting about what you're talking about is that if you look at it from a flowchart perspective, and kind of take it back to the kind of, it's a cyclical thing, kind of a thing that goes round, and taking you back to number 3, as you were talking about it, it actually resonated with me about where people are. If they are between stages 3 and 4, which is the stage between actually saying I'm about to get, inverted commas, my freedom, to the fact that now I can be more trusting of what's around me, which is stage 4, there is unfortunately a situation right now where people will vent, people will be frustrated, right? So when I talk about optimism, there's the danger that, as you said before, between 3 and 4, as they're moving between the whatever the new normal is going to be, or the fact that maybe there's another stage, which is where they will forget that they had an opportunity to think and contemplate. Gary, you mentioned earlier on.
May I beg pardon, just a second, that optimism itself is ignited at the point of love, Hannah. So when you have that shift from phases 1, 2, 3, and 4, you get back into a state of love, and love itself is optimism. This is connected back to God. So what happens then immediately within ourselves, gurus within, we connect to this and we move forward. So optimism is inevitable. We will have an inevitable optimism in everything we do, because as humankind, we never think we're doing anything wrong anyway. Even when it's an atrocity, we don't believe that's wrong at the time of committing that atrocity. Our key here is to be able to resonate back with the core values of humanity, to see if that can work with us and save and serve others as well. So beg your pardon for interrupting there.
No, that's fine. No, it's fine. I mean, I think, I was just going to say about Gary, one of the things that, again, you guys are masters at developing better strategies to help people. We were talking earlier on, and you mentioned it, to bring Gary in at this point. Some of the, I would call them outreach programs for individuals. Now, you have a Friday session that you run. It's quite interesting. You have virtual rooms where people can work together with a facilitator, a leader in that group to help. And you mentioned Samaritans. It's not obviously on that scale, but you've obviously vetted the individuals. But the stage which we were talking about, where people are frustrated, where they can't see optimism, where they can't build their own confidence, you've done something to help that. And you have these little groups. Gary, tell us about those in the context of those the Funky Friday sessions that you do.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Savi, and thank you for having us today. The Feel Good Friday was really brought about because a lot of our clients, and we were hearing also socially, that a lot of people were lonely. Now, depending upon your psychometric that Sukhi's just gone through, various people will be happy about the situation. Others would have been fearful of the situation. Others would have just embraced and said, oh, well, whatever. And then lastly, you'd have had those that are quite happy to be on their own. And what we found, particularly with those that the compliant, we'll take the compliance first of all, they love being on their own. But that's their choice. And what happened with this pandemic that went worldwide, and I think this is where the difference comes, because it was worldwide, it was, as you said in your opening, Dr. Savi, completely unprecedented. Nobody had anything to go by. The closest thing that we probably had to an understanding was back in World Wars I and II, where it was hitting everybody. Unfortunately, we've not seen anything like that since. Because it hit everyone at about the same time or within a month of each other, there was nothing to go on. There were no rules. Everybody was playing it by ear, effectively. So the compliant nature loves being on its own generally. However, they were forced into being on their own. And as such, somebody who would normally be quite comfortable being alone, not talking to anybody, suddenly felt fearful. So I think what happened here, and the reason that we brought Feel Good Friday in, was we wanted to give people a platform to be able to just come and talk. Remember, we were in a situation where nobody could see family other than their immediate household. Technically, they couldn't go outside unless they were a key worker. We were confined to barracks, effectively. How else do we communicate with each other? We have the telephone, but unless you're on an Android system or an iPhone or something like that, there are a number of people out there who don't have smartphones or iPhones. Therefore, it's still just calling and hearing a voice. And what we wanted to do, and we use the platform of Zoom. There are obviously other platforms that we use, but we used Zoom. We were able to enable a group of our inspired tribe, we call them, our own followers within Sukhi's group. We were able to enable them to come and just talk about how they were feeling. You alluded to like a Samaritan feel. All we wanted to do was give them something to hope for, something to be able to vent at, something where they could share how they were getting on during the day. And that's what Feel Good Friday was all about. And we've just done our 8th episode, our 8th week of Feel Good Friday. And what's happened is we've actually found people now calling it the start of their weekend. It's not the Feel Good Friday end of the week. It's now Feel Good Friday start of the weekend. It's like a party that, you know, we go to parties on a Friday evening because we want to forget about the week and start the weekend. This is what Feel Good Friday is about. We know we have the inspired dinners, which was again something that Sukhi, I, and Jatinder and a couple of other members of the group started, which was getting people around a table to have a chat. Social. It wasn't a business thing. It's not to sell. It's just purely to network and talk to friends on a, so what do you do? What does your pet do? What are your hobbies? That sort of thing. And that's what Feel Good Friday was about. And all we do now is we give people the opportunity of coming along and talking. We might have some topics that we talk about and discuss. And we've now brought in rooms, chat rooms, to enable with 4 or 5 different subjects, people to just choose a subject they want to talk about.
Yeah, and the other thing is and evolve. Actually, I think that's what you're saying. I think it's a safe environment as well, where
totally safe, totally safe.
Yeah, and what you were saying about it being the start of the weekend or the start of, you know, of doing whatever you wouldn't do at work. It's interesting that it's also an opportunity to, I wouldn't say vent, but to reflect, right? And it's kind of the second part of what we were going to talk about today, which we have touched on quite a lot. We spoke about optimism. We spoke about the fact that it's a retrospective, but without having, see, it's interesting, Sukhi, you mentioned a term earlier when we were having a chat earlier on in the morning about kind of a, you know, a call to self, which has a lovely, lovely term that you came up with. I think you should copyright it. You know, you put down a set of things that you're going to do. If you're on a website, you might go, oh, call to action. At the end, I'll press the contact us button as a trivial example. But a call to self is, I've actually had somebody help me. I now have a set of things that I could do going forward. Let's move on to the final part because we've got about 5 to 6 minutes to go. I wanted to ask you about the business confidence side of things. One of the things that you talk about to when people come and join that group is the sense of, you know, obviously there's the, you know, the companionship, which is physical, you know, not having that, but you have that in that forum. But in the back of their minds, they may be worried because they've been furlonged. They may be worried because their particular consultancy or work needs to be looked at again because maybe they won't have a contract. Maybe they won't have a permanent job after a certain period. Maybe in October, when the, you know, those particular firms are having to, you know, pay a greater amount compared to what the government's actually subsidising at the moment. Unfortunately, those firms may make a decision and say, well, we can't afford you anymore. So that will be trying on the back of people's minds. But we look at it from an employer perspective. How do the employers, and obviously they have to impart that as leadership to their people that work for them, who actually do the real work, right, in terms of the day-to-day transactions. How do they build that confidence? What tools and techniques can they use that will really give them that sense of, yeah, and obviously in the back of their mind, we mentioned it earlier, there could be a second wave. How do we kind of build that confidence in business, but also give those individuals a call to self to not only do something different, but maybe actually think about their situations in a different way?
I love it. So, wow, what a deep question. So the first thing is obviously they need to have a reference of self in the whole of this, because all of this revolves around our version of the world. Korzybski, there's a gentleman called Alfred Korzybski, and he says very clearly that we ourselves as humans are meaning-making machines. We constantly make meanings. Our Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji very clearly says, "Apna aap jano." So that's the first essence of any kind of change. Learn yourself first. So in context of that, if you start to get an understanding of self, I mean, by the way, you can go straight onto inspireduniversity.com/disc if you want to do the assessments of understanding self. But if you go on learning yourself, the principal understanding is if you have a reference of yourself, you can then adapt to the world. And this is the optimism of business that we're talking about. The tools that one can take is use the DISC psychometrics to learn self so you can move forward with life. It gives you an understanding of an adaptation that your version of the world is not the world at large, not the reality, it's just your reality. And as long as there is some optimism, which is love and light, that we will always adapt. And we must understand that whether it's Brexit, whether it's COVID, whatever, mankind, humanity will persevere and will prosper. The Guru Jesus has given us the understanding of that we will persevere and we will grow. So just to clarify, if I may, with reference to the actions, sorry, I'm speaking fast just due to time. The actions that one could take very clearly is just to look if they were a business, if they were an employer, or even if they were an employee, a part of a business, if they were an employed individual, self-employed, and they don't have any staff, it's still the same principle. The first thing is take heed of where we are, reduce our outgoing expenses so we can keep them in check. Take the sabbaticals that have been given to us, and I have an online show which I talk about this with reference to the Daily Tips show.
Yes, very good.
On our channel, thank you very much, on our channel, which is Sukhi Wahiwala official content on YouTube. And on there, we've spoken very clearly about certain aspects of this, what we're talking about now, and you can go into much deeper dives there. Get clear on what you're trying to achieve, get your expenses down, and get the assistances from the government which are supporting us all. Now we move forward into what's there's a psychology that I train here with the Synagogue method. I share a lot in universities and around the world with Maharaj the Kirpa to share the knowledge. The principle here is that make a note of what actual skills do I have. Yeah. First question is, what skills do I have? Create a list. Then ask yourself, what is it that I actually like doing? I make a list. The third thing would be is ask yourself, what resources do I actually have right now? Which is, do I have a car? Do I have a house? Do I have something that's valuable to somebody else and to myself? The fourth thing would be this is the core of understanding of how to keep the optimism and the focus going, is getting an understanding that there is going to be a good way forward. And we call this pivoting. So to pivot, and I've been talking about this for nearly 15 years of my life, we need to pivot our skills, our resources, our mindset, and our uniqueness within ourselves for the outside world, including the assets we have within the company, which are the resources. If we have an office, how can we now use that office? If we had a business center, how can we now change that? How can we adapt ourselves, which is pivoting? So these are the key questions that one would say to ourselves. So recently I shared within an interview very, very quickly with an ESP magazine, which is a national press around talking in the business section. And within 3 minutes, I was given a challenge to speak very quickly about 3 different types of businesses and what they could do. So may I share that now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got about 2-3 minutes, actually. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things would be, let's say if you had a taxi company or a taxi driver, well, go and pivot yourself and see, I've got the assets of a taxi, the ability to drive, and I must have the mission to step forward and do something about myself. Cover your face, get the PPE in place, put the safety in place, having spray in the back for keeping people safe and yourself in clean and hygiene away, and then going out and actually saying, do you know what? Elderly people, like the Sikh have been doing around the world, elderly people sitting at home, how can I serve them better? What if I turned around and went to all the restaurants, all the takeaways, all the grocery stores and said to them, have you got anybody who's in a disadvantaged position who requires a delivery? I will do the delivery for you for a set fixed fee within parameters. So we've got fixed fee scenario. And now you're back on the road, you're delivering without people, you're just going to collect bags and you're dropping off home. That's one opportunity. It's a pivot, very clearly, temporarily, while people are not using taxis so much. The second thing, let's say we look at an individual who's working for a corporate organization. The skills that they have learnt and understood, they could come to media and start to deliver this information via a training and education, which is a booming market right now, where they could share their skills to help other people, like we are today with this amazing initiative that you have, Dr. Savi. So there's just a couple of quick points where I've got the skills, how can I share them? What do I have? What resources? How can I repurpose them? But in an immediacy, and due to the case of time, I'll just go quiet there if it's okay.
No, that's okay. I was going to say that's a really good example. And I'm just bringing Gary back in for a second, because obviously, your business is very much around the kind of face-to-face coaching, as well as guidance, as well as career progression and advising companies. So you haven't actually been able to do that. So in a way, Gary, you have had to use Zoom and video conferencing as your tool. And we mentioned earlier, remember I gave the case of somebody who had a henna product and she can't do the henna, but she is able to make products and able to train people and actually have colouring books. What a brilliant bit of innovation that is. I'll leave the final minute, 30 seconds to both of you. Is this a quick question? Is this a time for innovation? Gary first, and then Sukhi, I'll get you to finish.
Totally, as Dr. Savi. We've seen it within our own clients. We ourselves have innovated the business growth mastermind, and actually we're looking for any individuals with skills who would like to share those, have leadership if they'd like to, because we are expanding the Business Growth Mastermind now because of being able to do it on Zoom. We're expanding it nationally. So if people would like to offer their services, please contact me on gary@bbr.club, and let's have a chat and email me. I mean, I've seen it, however, very quickly with colleagues I've worked with and dog walkers who I go out with in the mornings, and they are adapting their businesses. We've got painters and decorators who are going in and masking up rooms. We've got hairdressers who are doing new things. So there are so many businesses. I've even seen the taxi drivers locally with plastic sheets in between the front cockpit and the back cockpit to protect themselves. So I think people generally are being optimistic, and they are looking at innovative ways of coping with this unprecedented scenery. Sukhi, you.
I was going to say that, human ingenuity, really, isn't it? I mean, so
it is. It is.
With blessings, 100%. What I'm just going to echo what Gary just said there. There's always going to be some positivity out of adversity, so we've got to look for it. You know, there's an old saying that if I don't want to find it, I will never see it. So we have to just change our insides to see the positivity in the flow. And I'm going to say, of course, please reach out to us. I mean, we ourselves have gone out in that way, as I said to you, with Seva, with Maharaja's Kirpa, with God's great gratitude, that we're trying to help and serve people to get them up. Even those Feel Good Fridays are very structured, very orderly. So we're creating that change for people, and we're also offering platform for people with skills that they can share with other people, so they can actually host one of these rooms to give that innovation and give them the facility to step out of their norm and confidence up. And finally, with the Business Growth Mastermind program, we're looking for individuals who are in the professional realm, who currently may be out of business, and we're looking for ambassadors / chapter leaders in various cities. So we're going to go global. We've already planned it before we have a full franchise model. By all means, please reach out to Gary, as I said, or find me on social media, and please find me on sukhiwahiwala.com.
You're all over social media, both of you. I'm going to say thanks so much for joining me. We did go slightly over, but that's okay. Gary, thank you for your time. It's so nice to meet you again after ages. And Sukhi, you know, we know each other from before. It's so good to see you again. And I say thanks to the audience for tuning in, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.